You're a comedian, correct? I said, yes, Barbara, that's my professional title. I don't need you to like me for me to absolutely love you. So don't talk to me about who's a patriot and who isn't. I prefer Astroglide. Hi everybody, it's me, Kathy Griffin, and welcome to Kathy Griffin Talk Your Head Off. First of all, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this show. I just do it for fun, and we're building it together, so I love the comments. They've been overwhelmingly positive, which is a really nice change for me, so thank you so much. Now, little backstory. I did an episode a few episodes ago about a challenging time I had on the Stephen Colbert Show, and it took off in the press. And I'm not one to be like, oh, well, my press, but this one really did get a lot of coverage. And some of it was positive, some of it was me being a whiny bitch. I then talked about going on the James Corden show. And so while it seems like I just do a show where I talk shit about male talk show hosts, we're gonna do a fun one today. And I'm gonna tell you all of the fun, some scary, but definitely titillating behind the scenes about some of my appearances on The View. That's right, The View. Now, I'm not coming for you. It's not like that. I love The View, but some of you youngs are gonna have to do a little research. So the lady who started The View was a lady named Barbara Walters, and she is no longer with us, may she rest in peace, but she was just a badass, groundbreaking female journalist, and was with ABC for many decades and put up with all kinds of Me Too stuff. And then as she got older, she became more accomplished, but she was a tough gal. So I'm gonna be telling some of the Barbara Walters stories. She was famously parodied on Saturday Night Live by the late, great Gilda Radner. If you're a comedy nerd, you know who Gilda was. And Barbara never thought that was funny. So one time I was backstage in the makeup room for The View, which, by the way, should be its own show. So there's this big makeup room where all the hosts, and there are 5 hosts, and sometimes they have a 6th host. And I have co-hosted many times. They offered me a chair, a permanent, gig on The View. I'll tell you about that and how that fell apart. But also, I love doing that show. So right now, Whoopi Goldberg is in the head seat, and Joy Behar they're all great. I love the whole cast now. So the dogs will be moving at will. I don't know if you can see, but the dogs are here. And once again, they just sit on the couch when they see the cameras getting set up, and I think that's hilarious. So they love you and send their best. If you don't know what The View is, it's a show with a panel of 5 women, and they actually tackle news topics. So they have celebrities and stuff, but they also have authors, political figures. When you do The View, you kind of have to know what you're talking about. So I don't remember the first time I was on. It might have been in the 90s even. But I do remember, I go back so far, you guys, I remember when they were casting The View, and there was a word put out they wanted one female comedian, and Joy Behar got the part, which is great. And Joy is back. She wasn't on the show for a while, now they have her back, and she's great. I respect her tremendously. She reads the New York Times cover to cover every single day. She's super smart. I love all those women. I love Whoopi. She's an idol of mine, and she's a friend. And we'll talk about, the history of the different hosts. And I don't know if you know this, but there was a very iconic episode where then host Rosie O'Donnell got into it with then co-host Elisabeth Hasselbeck. And I'll tell you all about that because I was guest hosting the next day. Hold on, I have a cheat sheet, so let me see which show to even start with. Oh, the other thing I want to say is that I'm grateful to The View because, like Jimmy Kimmel, they also were willing to cast me after my lung cancer and I had a paralyzed left vocal cord and I had a voice like this. They were willing to still have me on the show, which was difficult because there I am trying to be funny, and I'm a comedian, an actress, and you can barely even hear what I'm saying. So just real quick, let's take a look at that clip. You guys, I had lung cancer even though I never smoked, and so they had to take out half of my left lung and then alter my voice, and I don't like how you're all flaunting your 2 lungs in my face. Right? And can I tell you what was great about that episode? Everybody was so nice to me. I mean, usually when I go on The View, they're like, oh God, what is Kathy gonna do this time? Remember, it's a live show, Kathy. This is on ABC. And I'd say, oh, you can trust me. But really, I would say whatever I wanted. After I had cancer, you know, I love to play the cancer card. Oh yes, I'm shameless about it. I survived 2 cancers, did you know that? Lung and then down in my uterus. Okay, so anyway, I make fun of cancer all the time because of course I feel like I can. And so when I went back on The View and I had that voice, all the women were surrounding me and they're all like, are you okay? Can I get you a chair? Someone get her some water. And I was like, I think I can live for another hour. Anyway, they were lovely and I laugh about it to this day. So I'm also gonna tell you that it took me a while to get my footing as a guest. And I think about, I'm gonna say like the first 5 times I appeared on The View, it was crickets. I just, you know, these talk shows, there's a vibe in the audience as well. Same thing happened with Jimmy Kimmel. It took me a few appearances to be like, okay, this is what the Kimmel audience likes. This is the kind of humor they like. And I tried to adapt. And now I feel like when I go on The View, they're so nice. I go out and I wave and sometimes they even stand in the audience for Granny. Isn't that nice? Okay, so let me just start with Barbara Walters. First of all, I loved her and she couldn't stand me. And she scared the shit out of me. But that is a quality that I'm very proud of, which is I don't need you to like me for me to absolutely love you. And that was my relationship with Barbara. So she's, you know, was a living legend and icon in her own time. But she could be tough. So she would do stuff like kick me under the table if she didn't like the jokes I was making. I mean, this woman kicked me under the table. And this, you know, there was no time's up. There was no one to go to. And also, I don't want to say I liked it, but absolutely showed off the bruises from Barbara Walters to all my friends. When I would go on with Barbara, she would be kicking me under the table, and then in the commercial break, she would often give me a dressing down, which I also loved and looked forward to. So in the makeup room, like I said, all the hosts are there, all the hair and makeup artists are there, and they give you this big packet the night before if you're co-hosting with, I mean, there must be 50 topics. And you know they're gonna end up getting to like maybe 3 or 4. Then we meet in the hair and makeup room in the morning, and then Barbara would come in and she would decide which topics we were gonna cover. Kind of getting the vibe of the room, but not really. It's really what Barbara wanted to do, which is kind of how the world went in her world. You'd study all the topics the night before. So if I was co-hosting, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have to be ready for Barbara to call on me about any one of these topics, politics, culture, art, I mean, any kind of everything. You study and you don't want to look ridiculously stupid, but it is live TV and anything can happen. Barbara would often scold me prior to the show. And she had a funny way of talking and she would say, now Kathy, when we're all around the table talking, please don't feel you have to be vulgar. Do you always have to be vulgar? Can't you just do your comedy routine without being vulgar? Vulgar means vulgar. And the answer is no. Actually, I can't. Like one time, I don't know if you know this, but my friend Paris Hilton, who I didn't know at the time, or maybe I just met her, but Paris actually served time. She served 30 days in jail. And it was a really big deal because obviously Paris is still very, very famous. And it was a big deal, a big star. Unlike our current president, she got convicted of a crime and had to do the time. And so who got the interview was a really big deal at that time. And I remember I was co-hosting The View one day and Barbara kicked me out of the table and she goes, do me a favor, Kathy, don't be too hard on Paris. I'm trying to get the interview. Everybody wanted to get the post Paris Hilton jail interview. There was a man named Larry King who had a show on CNN for decades, and that is where Paris went right after she got out of jail, because Larry was known for being tough sometimes, but he could be kind of softball as well. So he would be kind of a kinder, gentler way of going on a show and explaining your bad behavior. And kids, you should know, in the 90s and 2000s, if you got in any kind of trouble or said something that was inappropriate, you then had to do the talk show circuit, and that was like that version of today's apology videos on YouTube. Like you'd have to go on Oprah and cry, you'd have to go on Larry King and cry. Like after my first divorce, which was under very painful circumstances, I went on Larry King and decided to tell my story. And I'm actually glad I did that. It was difficult, but I'm glad because that was also a live show. I then was booked to go on The View to promote something I was doing in the comedy world, whether it was one of my specials or a TV show, I don't even remember. And Barbara wouldn't have me on as a guest unless I agreed to talk about my divorce. And I didn't want to. So I kept saying, just tell Barbara no. I don't want to talk about my divorce. It's too painful. I don't want to start to cry. And, you know, I've already done the full hour on Larry King. And then Barbara said, tell her she can't come on the show unless she talks about her divorce. And so I ended up telling the story on The View, of course, because once again, I would do whatever Barbara said. But that's the kind of pull she had. Let me just get right to the Hasselbeck of it all. So there was a lady named Elisabeth Hasselbeck. And get this, she was on Survivor. That's how she started. She didn't even win. She was just on Survivor. And then The View is always looking for a conservative young mommy. As long as I've been going around the block with that show, they've wanted a young conservative mommy. And so they got one with Elisabeth Hasselbeck. But at the time, it was kind of weird that they would take someone from Survivor and put her on really a prestigious show, a daytime show that was 5 days a week where you had to know your shit, right? She was surviving on there just like she did on Survivor. And you know, she would get her talking points from the producer, Bill Getty, and he would just get them from Fox News. Now, this was during George W. Bush. Now, I know Trump is bad, but we've kind of revised history. Now we act like W wasn't that bad. He was horrible and arguably a war criminal. And I performed for the troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. So don't talk to me about who's a patriot and who isn't. I thought it was kind of funny that here's this woman that, number one, is from a survival reality show, and now she's getting talking points from a middle-aged white guy who loves Fox News and believes their propaganda, and then she would just parrot the Fox News talking points as part of the discussion. And they would get into it, and the ladies, just like they do now, they mix it up, and they like having different points of view. That's why the show is called The View. And I also remember, like, I started getting in trouble probably late 90s, and now I get in trouble all the time. But I remember, like, the first few times it happened, it really rocked me. And I discussed it with Joy Behar. And Joy Behar told me advice that I remember to this day. And she said, people love you until you have one opinion. The minute you have even one opinion, you're gonna lose half the people. So I really respect those women for going on that show day in and day out because they know there's blowback. And by the way, to this day, The View is one of the most buzzworthy shows on television or anywhere. People still get up in arms online talking about who said what on The View. So it's always been a high stakes show. So at this point, Rosie O'Donnell had already had her incredibly successful, I think she won 8 Emmys for her daytime talk show, which only ran 5 years. Somehow she got more Emmys than years on the show. The Rosie O'Donnell show is still one of the greatest shows in the history of all talk shows. When it came time to get a new host, they hired Rosie O'Donnell. Oh wait, I forgot to tell you about when they offered me the gig. I'm gonna sound like kind of a douchebag during this part. Like when guys try to tear me down or say I make shit up, they always go like, you always say you were offered The View, but they never confirmed it. So I found an article, by the way, where somebody did an article about it. And it wasn't me calling it in, I promise. I co-hosted The View something like 27 times. And, you know, I live in Los Angeles, and so I was flying out to New York, and, you know, they pay you scale and stuff, but they don't dress you and they don't pay for makeup outside the hair and makeup room, and they're already so busy and overbooked and all that stuff. So eventually I said to my agent, okay, tell them if they're gonna offer me a permanent chair, please tell them to just offer me the chair or not, but I keep flying out there and they're trying out new hosts so much that I'm like, I'm done auditioning, did I get the job or not? So they made me an offer, and the offer was for 1.4, and I'm just gonna be honest, I had to turn it down because at the time, between doing my life on the D-list and touring, I was making about 10 a year. And so I had to turn down The View because I would have had to uproot my whole life. My mom was still alive, and my dad might have still been alive, actually. And I didn't want to leave them. And my mom and dad didn't want to get on airplanes anymore, so there wasn't a situation where I could have brought them with me. And it was a whole thing. I remember when they offered me the job, Barbara Walters said backstage one time before we were about to go out and do the live show, "They say we have chemistry. I don't really see it, but they say we do." And I loved that. I said, "Of course we do, Barbara. People love when I give you shit." And then she'd just roll her eyes. And then another time, this was during My Life on the D-List. Remember Tom from My Life on the D-List? Well, he was a sweetheart. He came along with me backstage at The View one time when I was co-hosting, which means he followed me all the way backstage until it was time to go out and wave to the audience, right? So I think the costume person was helping me with like a bracelet I was wearing or something like that. And then Barbara, it's time for her to come up a couple of stairs and go out on stage. So I said, "Tom, you know, Barbara's getting up there, help her up the stair. Make sure she's okay. We don't want Barbara to fall." So he does the gentlemanly thing and kind of lightly touches her elbow and kind of offers his arm. And Barbara hit him. She hit his arm. Oh, it was epic. It was fantastic. Tom didn't bat an eyelash. And if you really want to go deep, he didn't have any to bat. But that's if you're like a D-List super fan. Anyway, I'll never forget that. She just hit him. Oh, I love it. Can't do that now. He was fine. He might still have a small laceration. Anyway, it gets in deep about whether or not I'm going to do the gig. And so I was either a guest or co-hosting another time. And it was important to me that I pulled Barbara aside and I said, "I want you to know why I'm going to say no. It's not that I think I'm too good for this show. It's the opposite. The show is too good for me. But I'm going to be honest, this is how much money I made last year. I will show you my tax returns. I don't want you to think I'm blowing smoke, but between moving costs and I'm so entwined with my mom and dad and I work, you know, I have a house in Los Angeles and it just isn't feasible for me to do. But I want you to hear it directly from me." And she did not like that one bit. She didn't care. They didn't up their offer by a penny. I think I might have said something like, "Can you meet me halfway?" And they didn't. But there's the real story. And I know I sound like a bougie asshole, but I've been friends with Susie Orman, the money lady, for a long time. I say I'm only good at two things: funny and good with money. They hire Rosie O'Donnell to come on the show. Rosie O'Donnell, as you know, is politically very far to the left, and yet she really wanted to get along with Elisabeth Hasselbeck. And everybody was excited about Rosie coming and co-hosting. Barbara most of all. And Rosie idolized Barbara as I do, but Rosie really got to know Barbara very, very well. They would mix it up on the show, and Barbara could be a contrarian. Like, she was a Republican, but I would say more of a centrist, but she was afraid of Donald Trump, and she would call him the Donald, and she and the Donald would run into each other all the time. And he was on the show, you know, occasionally as well. And, you know, Rosie wasn't having his BS. Rosie famously made fun of Donald Trump for the first time. She took her hair, flipped it over, and did a funny impression of the Donald and said he was a snake oil salesman and that he had gone bankrupt, and that is very well documented, although apparently a third of our country doesn't care about that. So Rosie comes on the show and she's doing really well as the new co-host and people are excited. But she and Hasselbeck are mixing it up more and more, right? Because Rosie is politically where she is, and Hasselbeck was listening to Bill Getty and the Fox News talking points and busy being a conservative mommy. There was one episode where they really got into it, and The View did something that they've never done before, which is they decided to go to what's called a split screen. So I can do it for you right now. Watch. I'm mad at you and I'm gonna yell at you. I'm mad at you too and I'm gonna yell at you like this. So it was like that with Rosie and Hasselbeck. Now, I think in retrospect, this was probably a good thing for Hasselbeck because, you know, she wasn't really on anybody's radar too much at that point, but they got into a political discussion and it was about, ironically, facts versus feelings. And I, of course, am Team Rosie, and I would give Hasselbeck some shit. When Elisabeth Hasselbeck was still on the show, I had a personal mix-up with her because I was not afraid of her. And she tried to catch me off guard one time. And like I said, it was a live show. And I'm just going on there trying to be funny. But if someone like Elisabeth Hasselbeck with her stupid ass is gonna come for me, she's gonna get this. Let's take a look.
You kind of, you know, promoting things.
Actually,
when
this
said
moment is what I live for, so bring it.
In my head whether feeding your curious fire there.
No, this is how I write my act.
It's cool. We're cool.
I'm cool if you're cool. I think it's all for a joke. So cool.
It's all cool.
I know, right? You're welcome. This fight breaks out. It wasn't a fight. It was a discussion between Rosie and Elizabeth, but they do the split screen. Halfway through the day where they had the fight, it was already making news. Like Rosie O'Donnell and Elisabeth Hasselbeck lose it on each other. The View goes to a split screen. The argument heard around the world, right? Now, this is probably in retrospect a bunch of dudes that were the head of ABC at the time that, as usual, decided to pit women against each other. And, you know, we always fall for it. But it was seismic. So I am good friends with Rosie and was then. And I said, okay, well, I'm co-hosting tomorrow. How can I have your back? Because everybody's talking about this episode. And O'Donnell goes, Griffin, because when she calls me, she goes, Griffin, it's O'Donnell. And I always say, O'Donnell, it's Griffin. How can I help you? So then Rosie goes, I'm not going in tomorrow. I go, O'Donnell, this is your show. Everyone is talking about this incident with you and Hasselbeck of all people. You got to go in tomorrow and wipe the floor with her. You know you can do it effortlessly. Griffin, I'm never going to this show again. The minute they went to split screen, I was out. The minute they pitted us against each other like it was a bad show on Fox News or something like that, that's it for me. I'm not going back. And I said, well, you have a contract. And Rosie, being Rosie, didn't care. And she said, I'm not going in tomorrow. So I go, okay, wait a minute. Now I'm the co-host. You can't abandon me because people are very divided about this argument. Everybody's talking about it, Ro. And I'm not going in. I was there the day after, and I walk into the hair and makeup room, and I mean, there was a vibe that was just different. It was like a little noisy for a minute, then it was a little too quiet for a minute. And all the times I've been in that makeup room, I've never felt whatever that energy was. So Barbara walks in and it gets kind of quiet. She sits down, she's getting her hair and makeup done, she's going over the topics. And then I decide I'm going to the makeup room, I'm not missing this. So I said something like, Barbara, how's the show been going? Anything going on? You know, just to piss her off. And then she just kind of rolled her eyes and stuff. And I would do Barbara like, I, love Howard Stern and I go on his show. And one time I went on the Stern show and he was asking me about being on The View because I was about to leave the Stern show and go right to The View. And he was making fun of Barbara Walters, but in a lighthearted way, and saying he would still hit that or something about her still being sexy or something like that. And somehow it came up that Howard and I were talking about Barbara Walters and lubricants, like sex lubricants. I go in and I said to Barbara, oh, I just came from Howard. And she said something like, typical. And I said, he was talking about how you two still have a chance and he would love to make sweet love to you sometime if you're available. And he doesn't think you would even need any lubricant. So I say this to Barbara Walters to get a rise out of her. And you know what Barbara says right back to me? I prefer Astroglide. My hand to God. Barbara Walters was probably in her 70s. God love her. And she goes, I prefer Astroglide. Now, she denied saying that till the day she died, but she said it because that's how epic she was. So, come on, Barbara, you know you said it and that was funny. So back to the day after the Rosie O'Donnell Hasselbeck fight split screen. I go in and the last person to arrive was Elisabeth Hasselbeck. When I walked into the studio, there was a ton of press outside the door to get into the studio, which I had never experienced as a guest or a temporary co-host, but I was definitely co-hosting this day, especially since O'Donnell didn't even show up. And by the way, she then never did the show again. Let me just get that out of the way right now. Never did the show again. Never went back on her word. So I go in, I sit down next to Barbara, and she goes, now, Kathy, whatever you do, do not bring up yesterday on the show today. We are not going to discuss it. We are not going to go over it. We are the view. We are going to take a moment to enjoy the view. That is the motto of the show, and that is what we are doing today. So I'm like, oh yeah, Barbara, got it. You know me. The last thing I would do on live television is mention the fucking press show that's going on around yesterday with my best friend. You're safe. Then Hasselbeck comes in. She was the last one to arrive. So she comes in and I'm giving her the side eye, but I'm like, not yet. Save it, Griffin. She walks by Barbara and then Barbara says, Elizabeth. And everyone's like, what's this gonna be? And she goes, I think you've done a very good job handling the fallout from yesterday. Keep doing a good job. And I'm like, bitch, you did not just turn on my friend Rosie O'Donnell. Not on my watch. The show went on. We had our topics. I think I might have mentioned it minimum 7 times. Every time we were all talking about whatever was the topic of discussion, it's called Hot Topics. And I would say, yeah, but what about yesterday? Can you guys believe that? How did you guys handle yesterday? What are you guys doing here talking about anything but yesterday? And so, of course, Barbara was furious with me. Then I was banned. But when you're banned from a show, they don't tell you you're banned. They just say they're too booked up for years. So eventually, I think, I went back and did the show with Barbara, and I would have moments with her. So you guys know Martha Stewart, right? So I'm scared shitless of her too, and you should be as well. I mean, I love her. If you haven't seen the docuseries about her, run, don't walk. It is fantastic. Now, she, of course, is self-made and built an empire about gracious living, and she doesn't just cook. She cooks and she decorates and she does everything, and yet she's a bad bitch. And maybe doesn't have the greatest sense of humor. Martha, if you hear about this, by the way, Martha will never watch this, but she might hear about it and then get pissed. But I'm used to Martha Stewart being mad at me. So Martha Stewart would come on and do cooking segments, and she went on all the shows and did them. But the only time I ever saw Barbara Walters nervous was when Martha was coming on. And for once, Barbara comes into my dressing room and she says, Martha is here today. And I go, I know, I can't wait to see you two titans go at it. This is gonna be epic. Cage match, dog fight, and she of course is not laughing. And then I would insist on taking a picture with her. And she didn't like that either, because she never liked her lighting. Ring a bell? I know. She said, now, you're a comedian, correct? I said, yes, Barbara, that's my professional title. How can I help you? And she goes, well, maybe you could be next to me during the segment with Martha. I don't really cook. And I said, I don't cook either. And she goes, well, maybe this one time you could be next to me. So I got the okay from Barbara to do a freaking cooking segment with her and Martha freaking Stewart. So I'm in. So I find out that Martha Stewart's dressing room is right across the hall from mine. And I mean like 3 feet away. So Martha's late, which is fine. She's Martha Stewart, she can be late, but it is a live show. Turns out the driver from the car company that the show hired got lost. Well, let me tell you something. You do not want to be a professional driver with Martha Stewart as your passenger and then get lost. So you guys, I got to witness Martha being, by the way, very nice to me and very gracious and incredibly professional, but I left my dressing room door open and I could hear her yelling at the owner of the car company, and she ripped them a new asshole. I mean, it was fantastic. I was supposed to be here at a certain time, but guess what? Turns out I wasn't here at a certain time at all. Would you like to know why? Well, that's the reason I'm calling, because your foolish driver got lost and couldn't even find his way to ABC Studios in Manhattan. How do you feel about that? I'll tell you how I feel. Not good. I don't feel good about it one bit. And neither, it was heaven. I run and tell Barbara, and I'm like, Barbara, guess what? Martha's here and she's pissed. She's in a bad mood. You better not fuck that cooking segment just to get her going, right? So anyway, the cooking segment was fine. Martha's a goddess. And I think the last time I did the show with Barbara, before either I was banned again or she passed away, one of those two things, they were doing a double, so they were taping 2 shows in one day. One would be live, then they would tape on a Thursday for Friday. So I was doing the Thursday show that would air the next day. And Barbara was mysteriously absent. So she had done the first show and then she was leaving for, let's just call it the Kathy Griffin episode. So I got there so early that she couldn't avoid me. So while the live show was still going on, I got there, I probably took somebody else's dressing room or some shit. And then I waited for Barbara off stage. So then Barbara hears I'm waiting for her and I can hear like production assistants buzzing like, yeah, Barbara knows she's here. Yeah, she knows Kathy Griffin's in the building. She's heard that Kathy's actually waiting for her. Okay, Barbara's on the move. Barbara's on the move. She will not be running into Kathy. We'll tell Kathy she's too busy. She's too busy. Miss Griffin, we're so sorry. Barbara has so many appointments. So then she's got to go to the bathroom because no matter how much of an icon you are, you still got to pee. And The View, at least they used to have like public bathrooms, like where all the hosts had to just go to a regular bathroom like you go to an office building with stalls. Like they didn't have private bathrooms in their dressing rooms. I go into the public bathroom, I mean, for the people who worked on the show, but still. And Barbara's in there peeing. And I go, Barbara, I know you're in here. I know you're avoiding me. And so first she doesn't say anything. And I go, I see your feet. I see your feet. It's me, Kathy Griffin. Don't act like you don't love me. Come on out. Let's have a hug. Let's take a picture. And then she's in the stall going, I really can't. I'm on my way to the Oscar de la Renta fashion show, and I have promised Mr. de la Renta that I would be on time. It's not personal. I adore you. I always have. I don't know why you make this up. She's yelling at me from the stall. So, you know, I waited her out. I waited her out. I was like Lee Harvey Oswald lying in wait. And so she came out. She was very gracious. I love The View. Thank you for listening to my whole story about some experiences on The View, but it's exciting. And I just want you guys to know there was a time when there wasn't a million streamers and a million shows to keep track of. And when those incidents would happen on The View, they really were seismic. They still are. But when Barbara was there, it was Barbara's show and she ran it with a tight fist. And I loved her for it. All right, you guys, that wraps up another episode of Kathy Griffin, Talk Your Head Off. And please follow me on Patreon and Substack and all the other ones. And like and subscribe. It's all about the views. Thank you so much, you guys. Love you and see you next week. Mwah.